There is a strip of land 4 kilometers wide that both Koreas have agreed for over 70 years never to build on. Inside it, minefields, abandoned guard posts, tigers. On one side of it, soldiers stand close enough to touch soldiers who are under orders to kill them. It is called the Demilitarized Zone. It is one of the most heavily armed places on Earth, and the war that created it never actually ended. No peace treaty was ever signed, only a ceasefire, signed in 1953, expected to last a few months until a real settlement could be reached. 73 years later, that settlement still hasn't come. And in August 2026, the president of South Korea stood up in front of his country and asked, again, if the two Koreas could finally sign one. So why has one of the deadliest wars of the 20th century never actually been allowed to end? The line two officers drew in one night. To understand Korea, you have to start with a decision nobody meant to make permanent. In August 1945, Japan surrendered, ending 35 years of colonial rule over Korea. The United States and the Soviet Union needed to divide the peninsula into temporary occupation zones to accept that surrender. Two American officers, Dean Rusk and Charles Bonesteel, were given the job overnight. They had no experts on Korea, they had a National Geographic map. They picked the 38th parallel because it split the country roughly in half and kept the capital, Seoul, on the American side. No Korean was consulted. To the Americans' surprise, the Soviets simply agreed. It was meant to be temporary, a line to organize a surrender, not to divide a nation. By 1948, it had become exactly that. Two separate governments had formed on either side of it, and 2 years later, the line stopped being a formality. A war that never got a treaty. On June 25, 1950, North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel in force. The United States led a United Nations coalition to defend the South. China entered on the north side later that year. For 3 years, the front line moved up and down the peninsula, sometimes hundreds of miles in a single season, before settling almost back where it started. Estimates of the human cost vary widely. Some put total military casualties on both sides at around 2.5 million. Others, once the broader civilian toll is included, put the number as high as 4 million or more. By 1953, neither side could meaningfully advance. The war had become a stalemate of trenches and artillery. Armistice talks began. They lasted 2 years and 17 days, 158 separate meetings, making it one of the longest negotiated ceasefires in modern history. A ceasefire, not a peace. On July 27, 1953, at Panmunjom, the Korean Armistice Agreement was signed. It stopped the fighting. It did not end the war. The agreement was signed by the United Nations Command and by North Korea and China. Kim Il-sung and the UN commander also put their names to it. One government refused to sign at all, South Korea. Its president, Syngman Rhee, wanted the peninsula reunified, not divided, and would not put his name to an agreement that left it split. The armistice took effect 12 hours after it was signed, meaning soldiers on both sides kept fighting and dying for ground that would mean nothing by nightfall. It was written to hold only until a political conference could produce an actual peace. That conference happened in Geneva in 1954. It failed. And because an armistice is a ceasefire, not a treaty, the legal state of war it paused was never actually closed. The zone that isn't demilitarized at all. The armistice created a buffer, the Demilitarized Zone, running 250 kilometers coast to coast, roughly 4 kilometers wide. Despite the name, it is considered the most heavily fortified border on the planet. An estimated 1 to 2 million landmines are buried inside it. Close to 2 million troops are stationed on both sides combined, backed by thousands of artillery pieces, many hidden in mountain bunkers on rails so they can be slid out and fired in minutes. And because almost no human being has been allowed to permanently live inside it for 7 decades, the DMZ has become something nobody designed it to be, one of the most important wildlife sanctuaries in Asia. Researchers have documented close to 6,000 species inside it, including animals now rare almost everywhere else on the peninsula, like the red-crowned crane and the Amur leopard. A strip of land built entirely to keep two armies apart has quietly become one of the safest places on Earth to be an endangered animal. The two villages and the flagpole war. Two villages sit inside the DMZ itself. On the south side, Taesongdong, real residents who must prove ancestral ties to live there in exchange for tax and military exemptions and an 11 p.m. curfew. On the north side, Kijeongdong. North Korea calls it a town. Everyone else calls it propaganda village. Bright buildings widely believed to have no real residents at all. In the 1980s, South Korea raised a 98-meter flagpole over Taesongdong. North Korea answered with one nearly 160 meters tall, briefly the tallest flagpole on Earth. Two governments racing to fly the higher flag over a village that isn't really there. Starting in the 1970s, South Korean patrols found something else: tunnels. The first was discovered in 1974 after soldiers heard explosions underground. A third turned up in 1978, just 44 kilometers from Seoul. A fourth in 1990. Each was wide enough to move thousands of soldiers an hour, in the dark, beneath a border both sides had agreed to leave empty. North Korea denied it. Officially, it called them coal mines, dug through granite that doesn't contain coal. You can walk into one today. It's still, unofficially, exactly what everyone already knew it was. The day a tree almost restarted the war. On August 18, 1976, a UN work party entered the Joint Security Area to trim a poplar tree blocking a sightline between two observation posts. Routine maintenance. North Korean soldiers confronted them, and in the struggle, killed two American officers, Captain Arthur Boniface and Lieutenant Mark Barrett, with axes taken from the crew's own tools. 3 days later, the U.S. and South Korea sent over 800 troops back to the same tree and cut it down anyway, backed by a show of force so large that 150 to 200 North Korean soldiers just stood and watched. North Korea admitted fault. No wider war followed, but for a few hours, a tree branch nearly restarted one. The attempts to actually end it. Real attempts followed to make the armistice permanent. Multi-country talks in the 2000s tried trading North Korea's nuclear program for a peace process. They collapsed. In 2018, the two Koreas' leaders met at the same joint security area and pledged to work toward a peace treaty. A U.S.-North Korea summit followed that year too. Neither produced one. The war stayed exactly where it had been since 1953. Paused, not over. The North gives up on reunification. In January 2024, Kim Jong-un said something no North Korean leader had said before. Pyongyang was abandoning reunification altogether, and the South should be treated as its principal enemy. Within days, North Korea tore down the Arch of Reunification in Pyongyang, calling it an eyesore. In March 2026, its parliament quietly adopted a revised constitution, not made public until May. It removes every reference to reunification and, for the first time, defines North Korea's own borders directly. It stops just short of calling the South a hostile state in the actual legal text, even though Kim's own speeches already do. For 70 years, both Koreas at least claim to want the same ending. As of 2026, only one still does. The South asks again to finally make peace. On August 15, 2026, the anniversary of Korea's liberation from Japan, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung called for talks to finally replace the 1953 armistice with real peace, and floated discussing North Korea's nuclear program as part of that process, not a precondition for it. As of this recording, North Korea hasn't responded. Some 2026 reporting also points to new North Korean construction inside the buffer zone itself. Roads, bridges, barriers, eating into the one thing it was built to be: empty. One government legally erasing the idea Korea was ever one country,